All right, good evening. Welcome to the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website and nbrradio.us. We got to bless the show before we get started. Let's go. When I was in my mother's womb, I had a calling on my life to do something in the glory of God and marry it like a wife. Commit myself to his word and never be led astray. And when it's all over, when he comes, I'll be glad to see that day in the morning time. All right, good evening and welcome to the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also, streaming from the KCAA Radio.com website, the station that leaves no listener behind. And that's right, we got an app. So make sure you go to Apple or iOS or whatever Android you use platform. Download the app and catch all of my teammates' shows Monday through Sunday. All day, all night long. You can catch different talk shows here on KCAA Radio. Today, very impactful, important show for you as always here on the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio. Let's see, today, Sunday, started off with church online. I did my cousin's church on Zoom and then my church MOR online. Of course, you remember I'm the part owner of, I can say part owner now because I don't own the IE Hounds anymore by myself. So I'm part owner of the IE Hounds. We're in a Pro-Am tournament right now. Today was the first day. So the basketball ministry that I'm involved in kicked off today in the G5 Pro-Am out here in San Bernardino. They're not called the IE Hounds in this tournament. We call them the Wild Dogs. So the Wild Dogs are in the 7-game series Pro-Am tournament. Today they did, of course, they won. What can I say? It's going to be interesting for sure. First game of this season for them, and so started off kind of rough.
So you saying development stages still?
Well, yeah, as well, but it's the fact that Coach LG is using this platform is also to see who's going to play this coming season with the ABA, and so these are some of the returning players, couple new players that actually performed really good, played really well. So again, we're using this to develop and figure out the starters on the ABA team for this coming season. With that, I partnered with my nonprofit to do my sickle cell trait awareness. So you'll see on WDC, on SCT, you'll see some footage and some pictures and stuff, bringing awareness about sickle cell trait with athletes, the basketball community. So that's the conversation I'm up to right now. As far as Hounds, again, we are returning this year with a campaign. Mr. Walker and I was talking offline. I shared with him on the phone a couple weeks ago. The mascot is the Hounds, a dog, and the team name is IE Hounds. What better way to bring awareness to our pets? For me, it's personal. I had a female boxer for 14 years. I got her when she was 8 weeks old, and having a pet, they don't live forever. No one lives forever, not even our animals. And so I started looking at how much time does she got, right? She got to like 12 years, and I'm like, okay, how long do boxers live? Oh, they live about 14 to 16 years. And so I'm like, okay, well, you know what? In my mind, I'm like, I'll let her pass naturally, like,
okay,
right? Yeah, that didn't work. Around the 14th year, the last pretty much 6 months of her life, she just started to deteriorate, and she was suffering. And I was like, I can't. When I seen it in action, it was different than what I thought I could handle. And so I called my daughter, and we chose to put her down. She made it to be 91 years old, human years, 14 years, dog years. and that was tough.
And you haven't tried to replace her?
No,
Oh boy. Okay.
and my reasoning, if I give you a reason, would be my dad passed in 19, my grandfather passed in 20, and then I had to put my dog down in 22.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just
Wow.
like, I'm just not emotionally there for another dog.
Well, you and I were talking about emotional detachment. I've never had a dog
Yeah,
and been a quote unquote pet lover,
yeah,
but I feel your pain.
yeah,
So
yeah. And that's the part where, me and then my co-owner, Dr. Bonds, we were talking on the phone that day, and he had his dog for 17 years.
wow.
And so we're both on the phone talking and grieving, sharing our stories about our dogs. And I'm like, why don't we just put a campaign together for the basketball team, and that'll connect us to the community, and then we can raise awareness to the dog around man's best friend. What I don't have right now is the patience. That was like having another child.
Exactly.
And
That's how I
that's what it
understood it, yeah.
takes. It takes that kind of, if I got to go out of town, who's going to watch the dog? Like my dad would be the one that would come over and watch the dog if I had to go out of town, or my daughter would come by. And it was like, if you're being a responsible pet owner, that you just don't neglect that animal. And so I made sure that if it was,
And that was an immediate attraction to you with the dog? I mean,
no, not at all. My supply sergeant at the time was looking for a dog, and so I went with him to look at the boxers, the breeder who had the boxers. So when we went to go look, it was like, oh yeah, it's cool. So he went to go take a look, and then we left, and he was like, hey, like 2 weeks later, I'm gonna go get the dog. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go with you again. Well, I go and I pick, and so Daisy and I connect,
boy.
and there was a wrap. 8 weeks.
It was a
she
wrap.
was 8 weeks old.
No.
Yeah. So that's how. And I didn't think about any of the care, who's gonna watch the dog, because we all had to work. So my ex-wife was like, well, who's gonna watch the dog during the daytime? I'm like, oh shoot, can't leave the dog in a cage for 12 hours.
Wow.
So I was able to take the dog to work. And he brought his dog, the brother, and we trained and developed the dogs for 8 months. I had the dog with me at my job. And so the relationship bond was there. And so our campaign, go to at IE Hounds ABA. Our campaign coming this year is For the Love of Dogs. We're looking from all aspects of the care for our dogs, from the breeders down to grief counseling for animals, like animal death. Like that's how far the range is to find.
Well,
business
you're
in.
moving it in depth. I mean, you're not just playing around. That's what I liked about your concept.
Yeah.
Even though I couldn't connect with the pet loving dog, but
Yeah.
that's good.
Well, you're still a part of that community because you have a love for those animals, right? And so your conversation is just as important as ours, who had animals or have animals. So no one's left out. What else? Tonight's conversation, as you heard, Mr. Walker's here, live in the studio. Shouts out to Lisa, who introduced me to him a while back. And this has been a long time coming. So we finally put it together, and he's here tonight in person. And I want to give just him an opportunity to share his life, his stories, and who he is today and what he wants to accomplish. A lot of things that we talk about on the phone are in alignment because we care about people, especially our men. And so this segment, brought to you by Comigo, is going to be the life of which is a part of my series of my own life journey, from 2 years old to 50, of all the things that I discovered in my transition of just childhood to teenagers to adult years to military life to all that, to be in front of you today in that healing journey of what it turned into. So Mr. Walker is going to be here to share his story. We're going to ask some questions and he told me I better buckle up. So
Yeah, buckle up. We're going to flow.
we're going to flow. So let's
Yeah.
play our public service announcement. This is our current sponsor right now. Shouts out to Comigo. Such a blessing to be a part of this company. And again, for veterans, it is designed for veterans of PSA. However, as human beings, we all deal with some level of anxiety or stress. And how do you maintain that? With drugs, or guess what? You might be able to maintain that with your breathing, right? So check out Calm and Go.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calm and Go. Calm and Go is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes in moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calm and Go decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit calmandgo.com to learn how you can get Calm and Go through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
Prayers feel irrelevant. Thought that I was heaven sent. The chosen one was evident. Smack to my face, gut punch, take my medicine. Sick to my stomach, no calling for my mama. Drama filled combos with the father, broken promises. Asking me to hold on, not knowing if I can go on. Been waiting for so long, sick and tired of the same song. Are you really kidding me? Earning third-degree emergency, prepare for surgery. This is hurting me, certainly. Close the curtains, purchasing the final ticket nervously. Purging, rethink, seriously? Trying to take the higher road, feeling what's revealed were lies told. Hours so now I'm wondering if you're listening. Please close the distance and please grant my wishes. Please tell me what I'm missing. Come on, Lord, you got it.
All right, welcome back to the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Also streaming from the KCAA Radicom website. The station, there's no listener behind. Hey, look, if you got to get out of your car, grab your device, your smartphone, laptop, type in kcaradio.com, click listen live or watch live because we're in the studio. Myself and Mr. Walker. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for hanging out tonight, man. Like I said, we're not strangers, but do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listeners and we'll get started.
Yes, my name is Willie Walker Sr. I'm the CEO and Director of Operation of 777 Community Warehouse. We're a nonprofit located here in the IE. We've been operating now 15, going on 20 years in the nonprofit community. And we just added another component to our services, which is making sure that veterans have their full benefits. Mm-hmm. And that has been a eye-opener for me personally. And when you and I start talking and opening up about you as a veteran, I've never served, but at the same time, I've always been a street soldier. And there's very few benefits there, right? Other than being on probation or parole, But it's challenging, and the nonprofit community has always been there, but each community and each nonprofit needs to do more collaborating. Mm-hmm. The better that we collaborate and understand what we are doing, so we don't open up the same and doing the same thing next door to each other. Yeah, I agree. Unfortunately, in my experience of having a nonprofit for sickle cell trait awareness, there are a lot of sickle cell organizations across the country. Mm-hmm. And in the same vein as you're pointing to,
sometimes we have an event on the same day or during the same time when we could have just joined forces together
Absolutely.
and just had one big event for everybody. But to me, there is a selfish space in that as well. So that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that's another show.
Yeah.
But see, the nonprofits too. I mean, I've always taken a position that I feel like sometimes we enable the people when we just giving away food
Yeah.
and not finding the source or the root of the problem.
Exactly.
So, and that is why I saw little old ladies that are in the park giving away food and can barely lift up the bags themselves
Right.
and hand it out. And that's why, again, the collaborations and with larger nonprofits and even mom and pops, so that we can better serve the community.
I agree, and I thank you for that, taking on veterans, because that is a whole conversation of what veterans some deal with and the ability to apply for those benefits that they've earned. Right?
Absolutely.
And then to go through that process of being rejected. I was blessed because of my medical retirement. It was active duty, and so my paper was taken care of before I got out of the service.
Wow.
But a lot of
Okay.
people don't have that opportunity, and they have to do that on their own after service. And so there's just different dynamics to that process. But again, the ability to have the wherewithal to not give up after being
Absolutely.
rejected,
Mhm.
knowing
and
that
that
you
is
need
the
help.
case. They've been rejected time and time again,
Yeah.
and those disappointments and frustrations
Oh, yeah.
kick in.
Definitely. So, who is Willie Walker growing up, man? Let's go back in time.
That is a long journey right there. Well, I grew up in Pomona, California.
Okay.
One, and in Pomona then, where there was not the gangs that you are accustomed to seeing now, it was more of a community that everyone knew everyone. We moved to Pomona in 1959.
Oh, wow.
And there was very few people of color there in Pomona. And the growing up, but it was fun growing up in Pomona because we could go to house parties, east side, north side, Centown, the island, and there was no gunplay.
Yeah.
you know.
No beef or nothing
No,
like that.
none
Just-
of that. None of that. And growing up in Pomona, also it gave me an opportunity to really see another side of the world in terms of how people react to one another, how color does play definitely takes center stage sometimes.
Yeah.
But fortunately for me personally, playing sports, I didn't have that problem.
Yeah.
So everybody wanted me on the team. I could from football, basketball, baseball. So, but what I found out at an early age too, you were welcome to play sports, but after that game
That was
over,
it.
that was it.
See, I appreciate you bringing that part up. We're going to touch on that a little bit because even in today's times, you talk about from 19 what?
59,
59,
to 60s, yeah.
To 2025, when I watch a NBA game or a football game, and you see all the crowd laughing and joking and having fun together,
Exactly.
and then in the parking lot they hate each other or whatever that is. I think about that, my guy. I think about what is that can bring us together in these arenas and these concerts, but then you still carry that bitterness, upset with another person's color. I don't.
But see, and that's what you and we alluded to even before we got on air. People play these games of illusions, and they fantasize in their own head. I
Yeah.
mean, but the reality is what I understood at a later age, I might add, is that we're all the same, trying to find our way.
Yes.
And in trying to find our way, because of all these distractions, whether it be economics, whether it be race, are distractions from the real cause of what is keeping us from coming together and participating in making our lives and the community better.
Yeah.
It's
what you said. Even you're a bit older than me. we were born into this already, though. This was been
Absolutely.
going on for this ain't brand new stuff
Yeah.
we talking about. This has been for centuries and centuries of how religion is used as a weapon, how race is used as a weapon, how all of the dynamics are utilized to keep us separate, right?
And see, but if you don't have that home-bodied and guidance there, that's where it really starts.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, it is, and try to find it on your own, and it's difficult, to say the least. You know.
So you growing up in sports, in Pomona, what do you want to say about moms and dad and your environment growing up?
Well, my father was a no-nonsense person. He didn't, and he was not a communicator, I might add.
Yeah.
You know, it was do it my way or get out.
Yeah.
But he was a very hard worker, but he had a 6th grade education. My mother had a little bit higher education, and she was the matriarch in terms of education and pointing us in that direction. But again, my father and mother got together when she was 15 and he was in 27, you know, so that age difference and her gaining her own independence came late in life.
Yeah.
So he ran the show. So
And I can only imagine, this is what I tell people to look at in life, especially as an adult and you're willing to take a look, is looking back on how your parents grew up in their
Exactly.
environment, right? And so did you ever take a step back and look back at like how your parents grew up when they were children that has them be the way that they act?
That took some time because, again, if you remember growing up, when I was growing up, your parents ran things in my generation. And so there was no question. You would act one way at the house, and when you went out the door, you were another person. You was the cool Willie Walker, you know. But when you came inside that house, and he demanded that you be there before the lights go out on the street, and that's serious.
Yeah.
You know. So and if you didn't get there before the lights go out, you had to pay the consequences.
Yeah.
You know. So no matter how tough that all of my brothers thought we were, we knew who ran that house.
Yeah.
So, but growing up and like you said, taking that step back, I did that in later years. I didn't really understand or know my father until I was sitting in San Quentin State Prison, and he would come to see me when I was in my 30s, is when I really understood my father.
Wow.
One question that I asked him that stands out in my mind is that I would ask him, why didn't you come to any of my baseball games?
Oh my goodness.
And he said, but man, I had to work.
Oh my goodness, really?
Your games are at 3.
Willie.
I'm at work.
Willie.
But do you realize how many
Willie.
years that bugged me? Everyone else's parents is in the stands, you know, rooting them on, and he wasn't there.
Oh my gosh, Willie. That right there is a pivotal conversation on why we're even having these talks.
Exactly.
Because on how our childhood is growing up, and children, we want our parents' time in those younger years, and our perception may not understand why mom and dad can't come to the game in those moments.
That's right. And
But
he
that's
didn't communicate it at that age. But that is why when I was blessed to have my sons, I made it a point to be at their games.
Wow.
Encouraging them, supporting them. Even to this day, my grandsons, I'm at their games. But again, and I communicated, that taught me a better sense of how to communicate even with my sons.
Yeah.
Because I gave them, there was no just, this is how it is, and this is what if you can convince me,
Yeah.
if I tell you no, you got action at me to tell me, convince me one time why I should change my mind. They had that action.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
I did not
Really?
have that with my father. No meant no.
No, but yeah, no is no.
Yeah.
The other side of that when you said where you was located at, when you had that conversation, right? When we talk to men in any environment, whether it's prison or sports or military, that seems to be a defining moment of our sense of belonging to our fathers when we feel like they're not there when we need them to be or they should be.
Exactly. And because he was not a lovey-dovey, I love you kind of. He told me he loved me more when I was in prison than when he did when I was growing up. But again, that same other side of that coin is I expressed to my sons at an early age, and my sons now are 33 and 32. Every day I tell them that I love them. When we greet each other, when we part on the phone, because I feel that bond, as you were stating, is very important to us as black people with our sons, especially because how and what they have to navigate through,
Man, if you don't believe what we're talking about, there's a song that I play called Cats in the Cradle. And in that song, he talks about growing up with his son being born and him working. And at the end of the song, he hangs up the phone with his son and says, man, he grew up just like me. He turned out just like me. The disconnection, not being there, wanting to play catch and not having the time. Now he wants a relationship with his son. And his son's like, Dad, I got to go. I got bills to pay, got kids that's sick, and nice talking to you.
That's right.
And he hangs up.
And
And I believe if we tell the truth as men, we all have some version of that story.
Absolutely. But see, it's the having that, and I am proud of the relationship that I have with my sons to this day because of our open line of communication with one another. Because I told them that I didn't want them, they've never been in a gang, they've never been in prison. I was determined that they would not travel the same road that I did.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
You have to be there
with them.
You got to make those corrections.
And they're my heroes because if they did not come into my life, I don't know where I'd be.
Yeah.
I would either be dead or rich.
Yeah.
So that changed my life, having another life to be responsible for, turned my whole life around. That started that process of I've got to find a better way.
Yeah.
How to navigate, but having money, legal money.
Yeah.
How to be a more of an asset to the community as opposed to
your past experiences.
A menace.
What about moms?
Mom's heart was too big for her own good. Mom made a donation to the same man 3 times whose dog had died 3 times.
Oh, no.
Same dog that he didn't have the money to bury. And I said, Mom, this is the same man. But baby, it's going to be all right. I'm a blessing. That was my mother. Everyone stayed with my mother. My mother had a very big heart, very active in the community and in the church life. And to this day, those that knew my mother, especially in the church, she was gifted, and she had a big heart. Yeah, she was the love, So we knew that the old man was hard, but was gonna love her. And it's strange that you would ask about her because even after 25 years of marriage, my mother and father got a divorce. Wow. They came to the house, and my father made a statement: "You can either go with your mother or come with me because we're getting a divorce."
Wow.
That was an easy situation.
What?
I'm going with Mom, because with Mom, at 13 or 14, I knew that I could have my way.
Wow.
So, that's how that, but Mom's was,
wow.
But she was very loving. She had and everybody knew her in Pomona and how she conducted us, especially in church. She was very giving. Yeah.
And what about siblings? What do you want to say about?
Well, my oldest brother, Houston, Walker was a minister. Joe, the second one, was not a minister.
Yeah.
My brother Bobby was not a minister. He was a notorious pimp in Pomona.
Yeah.
Then came me. Then my other little brother, Kenny Walker, and then my sister, Adele Walker, was the baby of the family.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to touch on the sports before we take this quick break because we are a sports show as well, Sports Collective. You played multiple sports growing up, as you mentioned. In football, did you have a fourth down? Is there a point where you thought football was going to be the way out or a way to opportunity, or was it just for
No,
for
actually,
recreation?
I thought baseball was going to be my way
Really?
out. I was an exceptional baseball player, but football took my interest only because of when I went to San Quentin, you know. But baseball was to be my way out. But as we alluded to earlier about the different acceptance of the races, when they told me that playing on the baseball field and we won, and then that situation happened where the white dude went in his direction, my friend, and I went in another. It struck me right there. There's a line of demarcation here about how we're treated, you know, and that's kind of set up a rebellious spirit in me, you know. Well, you're not going to just accept me when I'm on the field, and then when I'm off the field, you know, we can't be friends, you know. So it has to be ride or die, you know. So
Now that to me that's at a very pivotal part as well, because you've got your relationship with mom and dad and siblings, but in that sports world, that those teenage years, you're looking for acceptance in your peer age, and
absolutely,
and this is a fracture.
Yes.
You know, how did you end up dealing with that, if at all?
Well, I didn't, because a detachment, because I knew that I could play the sports, and your friendship wasn't the determining factor in my life.
Yeah.
So what I did was, in growing up and playing sports, there was that rebate stuff, because when I went to, for example, Pomona High, I believe they had, out of a population probably of 2,000, they might have had 20 blacks.
Yeah.
You know, so playing sports there was a thing to do, and they didn't care about your grades as long as you could play sports. They put you on the field, you know.
The baseball segment that we have is called Gloves for Days. What was going on in the baseball? Was that peer age decision that I'm not going to play baseball no more because of the relationship, or what ended the baseball?
No, it didn't happen that way. It just the evolving, and I guess that also going to juvenile hall at 14 and 15, that took me away from my baseball career as well too. Okay. You know, and as strange as we are down this road of conversation is because some of my best games, baseball and football, were on the fields of San Quentin State Prison.
Wow.
You know, one particular game that stands out in my mind, pitching 13 and a third innings of shutout ball, because we were in a league. Yeah. And outside teams would come in and play us.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, and then on football, we had same situation when you talk about you in service. Yeah. We played Moffett Field, Mara Island.
No kidding.
We were in that league, and before I got there, they was mopping us. They was mopping us up. We were something like 12 and 0. 12. And then, so they thought they had another cakewalk when they came back in, and they were disappointed.
Wow.
And we went undefeated that year.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Willie Walker here, our guest tonight on the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio. Again, thanks for listening in. We're going to come right back with some more talks with Mr. Walker here after this public service announcement, the Farron Dozier Show. Shout out to all the.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes in moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
Do you remember studying sickle cell in biology class? What's the Count on Sickle Cell Trait Prevention is here to bring you awareness, education, and prevention conversations around the risk factors of this inherited gene. Visit WDCONSCT.org. All right, welcome back to the Farron Dozier Show on KCAA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Again, streaming from the KCAARadio.com website. Again, I want to just touch on this real quick. I don't know if you can play. Let me see if this is going to play. Just listen to the first verse of this song, right? This is Cats in the Cradle, Harry Chapin.
My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it, and as he grew, he'd say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when.
When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when. Woo, man. It's a painful song, bro. Let me tell you.
My son turned 10 just
Now
the
he's
other
10.
day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad. Come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today. I got a lot to do. He said, that's okay. And he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. Said, I'm gonna be like him. Yeah, you know.
Hear them
I'm
decisions,
gonna
you'll be just like him.
And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, the little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then.
And the beauty goes by the age phases.
Right, yeah. That's
All right, check this part out right here.
Well, he came from college
Now
just
he's
the
in
other
college.
day. So much like a man, I just had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while?
Okay, you sit down,
He shook
let's
his
talk.
head,
Yeah.
And he said with a smile, what I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later, can I have them, please?
Ain't got time for him.
And the
See you later. I need just give me the keys, Pops.
Time.
I ain't got time. Give me the keys.
And the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then.
All right, here we go. Last one. I think he's retired now.
I've long since retired. My son's moved away.
Wow.
I called him up just the other day.
Called him up on the
I
phone,
said I'd
son.
like to see you. If
Now you wanna see him, check it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the time.
Dad, if I can find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids are the flu. But it's
time.
sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been sure nice talking
Ain't got time
to
for
you.
his own
no
pops.
time.
Where'd it come from, though?
As I
Look,
hung
look,
up
look.
the phone, it occurred to me he'd grown up just like me.
Grown up just like me.
My boy was just like me.
Man, you do not,
And the cats
as a father, you do not want that
No.
experience.
I was determined. No.
That,
No one to grow up like me.
let me tell you, that when I was healing with my dad, man, I had heard that song for years. That's 1974. I had heard that song for years. until I put my life in that and I heard the
What
relationship
do
with me
you,
and
how,
my dad.
what time or what age did you start paying attention to how that was fitting into your life?
I started my journey at 40, so from 2011 to I think somewhere in my mid 40s that I started reconciling with my father and listening to music because I love music. That song came on and I was able to listen to the words.
Right. Wow.
And I listened to the words and I could relate to that with my dad. Wanted him to be around and he wasn't around.
But you know what, that time in San Quentin, like I said, when I got to know him, there was an appreciation of him as a man and what he had to go through.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, you mentioned before we played the PSA that a lot of your best games was in San Quentin. What was going on that had you in that situation? As you said, juvenile hall as a teenager. What was going on, man?
Well, again, the rebellious, even like you said, you had made mention in some of our conversations even about revisiting those times of your life where you were trying to grapple with an understanding of what your life was doing and how it was doing, but you didn't understand it.
Yeah.
Part of that was the death of my sister in 1969, where I happened to be playing with a gun, flipping it around and twirling it around, and the gun goes off and hits her in the head and kills her. And at that time, again, 1969, I was 19 years old. And that's when the police about, well, we know it was an accident, you know, let's go downtown and straighten it out downtown.
Oh, wow.
So I go downtown and they said, they guided me into a padded dark cell, locked me in there.
Wow.
3 days later, when I was taken out and taken to court for a hearing, is when they charged me with first-degree murder.
Wow.
I missed my sister's funeral. After the funeral, then they brought me back to court, dropped those charges, and that started my rebellious state about the justice system and
no justice.
But again, see, talking about this now at 76 as opposed to 18 or 19.
Oh, yeah.
The difference there. How do you sort that out in your head? And then even a lot of our conversations that we have had off of the radio 101 was just that, having to grapple with and the back and forth of the guilt, the non-forgiveness, all that, all those years in San Quentin. And that is what, sitting across from my father, he says, I was upset with you.
Wow.
Because of Adele, my daughter, your sister.
Wow.
And I come to find out, before that I was born, he had lost his first daughter.
Oh, wow.
Because of through tonsillitis.
Oh, wow.
Some kind of way, during the course of that operation, the tongues, the tonsils fell through her throat and choked her to death. So all these things was, he never.
So he was hurting. Oh,
he was hurting all this
all
years.
those years he was hurting, man.
And he, I mean, again, he was not that communicative. He wouldn't sit down and have that conversation with us.
Man, oh man.
So he had to carry that.
Wow.
You know, so that possibly, not possibly, it did. That was probably the turning point in my sports life, because going in and out of jail. So
wow, thank you for sharing that, man. I really appreciate you. There's so much around men that we've talked about and talk from, because we share openly on the phone.
Exactly.
We talk, and I really appreciate you every time that we have those conversations. I'm not just talking to you or listening to you, but also self-reflecting myself and looking in my own life as a relatedness. A lot of times we try to understand people. It's not important to understand people. It's the relatedness. Because if I could use my imagination to watch movies and fantasize about stuff, Why can't I use my imagination to hear your perspective, your points of view, where you're coming from, where what your experiences are? Because that's the relatedness is most important.
Well, I mean, that is part of the reason that you and I are having this conversation now is because of our open conversations that we had over the phone.
Yeah.
Because there was, like you said, a connection there of, again, and all of us are going through these healing stages.
Yeah.
The most difficult part of my life has always been the ability to forgive myself for my own mistakes.
Yeah.
You know, once you take that responsibility, not just verbally,
Yeah.
but seriously take it to heart and be responsible for what you're doing, life opens up.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's not from a blame perspective or anything.
Absolutely.
It's okay. This is what happened. You got to separate what you made it mean about you so that you can start this self-forgiveness, because a lot of times I can't even imagine how you felt even at 18 for that accident to happen. Like, only you know how you felt in that moment. But I can imagine if I was in that situation, what would I do? I would be hurt myself. Like, I could relate. And so as men, these are the conversations that myself and Mr. Walker want to have with you men out there, with Mr. Oscar Snow, who was here, with my sports crew, with athletes, the veterans. Like, as men, I believe that we've got to figure out what our ingredients is as far as our life.
right there.
It could be upset, disappointment, shame, embarrassment, happy, joy. All that stuff is mixed in. But what's leading that? Where's
But see,
that coming
that
from?
perspective, like you said, though, dealing with that kind of pain is one thing when you're dealing with it one-on-one with yourself.
Yeah.
But then you have to come outside of yourself and present yourself to the world,
Yeah.
you know, and accept their interpretation of that.
Yeah.
So how do you relate to that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
You know?
The only thing I can say for myself is when I told the truth to myself, and it was, like you said, it was an accident, but in the areas of my life where I felt like I disappointed people or I hurt people, or I did such and such to people, I had to take responsibility for my behavior, for my character, and find that self-forgiveness that I'm okay. And what that does is when you own that experience, then nothing anybody says to you about that triggers you, because everybody's going to have their opinion about what that is.
That's
Even
right.
when you get your life together and you're a pastor or whatever kind of person, somebody in the world remembers the old you,
That's right.
and they're going to remember
Yeah.
that more than who you are today.
But see, that today, because I know who I am
Yeah.
today. But at 18 or 19,
Oh, yeah,
you
like
don't
I
know.
said back then. Oh,
And then going to into San Quentin at 21, 22, and then not leaving San Quentin until you're 36.
yeah,
You know, I mean, and San Quentin is not there to, well, come along, let us rehabilitate you. Let us, you know, what is wrong? Talk to us. Get in that cell.
yeah,
You know, and that is the kind of growth process you have to be. And if it wasn't, back to my mother, if it wasn't for her prayers, wow,
buddy.
you know, and she walked me through that with her prayers, even when I was at arms or at odds with God himself, you know, as ridiculous as that sounds,
Yeah,
you know, is that I turned him off.
Yeah.
You know, I had no communication with him.
well, I relate to you again because
Yes.
when you talk about mom's prayers, shouts out to my mom's prayers, because as we lead into Memorial Day tomorrow, that day is celebrating our brothers and sisters at arms who didn't make it out of those war zones or those combat
Absolutely.
zones, right? And so I, as a veteran of 24 years,
Wow.
who gave his life to death, that I didn't realize it till after I retired, that I actually gave my life to death at 19, right?
Yes.
And to now survive that and live that, Memorial Day for some of us veterans is not Happy Memorial Day. Some of us are dealing with survival guilt,
Right.
dealing with the loss of that brother or sister who lost their life during combat, or even more so, who came back from combat and took their life because they couldn't handle the mental anguish.
And
of
see,
losing
I've
a
never
loved
heard
one.
it expressed that way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because like you said, Memorial Day was the time to go out for family and veterans, but I've never heard it expressed.
Veterans Day is for those of us who are still serving and are still here. Memorial Day is for those who lost their life in service. And so I only say that because I had to deal with my own military career and peeling those layers off and having to be able to be okay with the world's view of the military.
But pulling those layers off, is that a healing part?
Yeah, heck yeah.
Where does that layer go? I mean, does it dissolve or is it?
I thought.
Yeah.
However, when I gave it to God and gave it back to Him, the Holy Spirit reminded me that's part of your identity, and you went through that to use that for who you are today. So I don't resist it anymore. I embrace it now, and I own it because that was my career. That was part of my identity as a sergeant first class. But the same career that He used to get me through that service, I'm now using that to give back to the community from my experiences and for what I'm up to in life.
Well, I can definitely relate to about giving back because even those who have come home from prison that I've given jobs to and opportunities. So if they are serious about
Exactly.
that transition.
So it's not, so in these conversations that I have, there's not really, yes, yours was prison, mine was military. You got athletes who play football for years. You got all these people and these police officers. Do you know that the police officer rate of suicide is just as high as any other career because their identity is in that badge?
Wow, yeah.
Like, so what is that part for us as men that we're going to have to be continued this conversation?
Yes.
But that's what we're here to talk about is that identity that we grow up that gets fractured from our environment. Like, Dad, how come you didn't come to my games because I was disappointed or whatever that experience was for you, that make the child feel like they're not a part of that home.
And like that's why I asked you about the peeling that layer off, because again, let people know that it is okay, especially men, that it is okay to express yourself.
Yeah.
You are we have to create that environment, that safe environment, so that you don't have to be Johnny Hard Rock.
Nah.
Just whoever you are, just lay it on the table and let's deal with it.
Yeah. So those are the conversations that Mr. Walker and I plan on having together in the community. And for those men who are going to join forces with us if you're on my ABA basketball team or you're part of the community or you hear this broadcast and you find yourself, ready to develop and the willingness, we're creating spaces for that to happen so that you can come and share. And just, if you want to talk, we are more than welcome to do that with you. So any last words you want to say, man, before we get out of here?
No, not other than I appreciate this and I see great potential in these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
So I look forward to them.
Anything you want to shout out to your sons? Anything you want to say? Where they at?
Love you guys. Let's do it.
Again, thank you for listening in. This is the Farron Dozier Show on KCA Radio 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. You want more information about my sickle cell trait, WDCOandSET.org. You want more information about how to reach me on the community stuff that we're up to at FarronD.com. You can go there, FarronD.com. Farron Dozier on all social media platforms. Shout us out, what's the count? Let's go.
Some of us still carry the burden of battle. It threatens to drown us in our everyday lives. In battle, we had our weapons and combat gear to keep us safe, to keep us confident. But when we returned home, we were not armed with weapons and gear to cope with our own minds. I was lucky to find my combat gear, my mental weapon, and it's called Calmago. Calmago is a drug-free device that allows you to achieve calm in less than 3 minutes. In moments of anxiety, stress, anger, panic, or insomnia, not with medication, but rather by activating the parasympathetic nervous system through breathing regulation and multisensory stimulation. A recent study has shown that Calmago decreases PTSD and anxiety levels in veterans, helping those who are suffering and having a long-lasting effect. Visit Calmago.com to learn how you can get Calmago through the VA or with a special veterans discount code.
KCAA.